So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this COP27 side event. This is titled The Role of Active Travel and Public Transportation in the New Paradigm of Sustainable Mobility. We are now here in the side event room Eamon in the area A of the Blue Zone at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. And this is being transmitted through the COP27 platform too. My name is Chantrill. I'm the Director of Sustainable Mobility at Asociación Sustentar. From this association, we conduct a transport working group for the Global Climate Action Partnership, formerly called Let's GB, in the framework of the regional platform of Let's LAC. This event is co-organized by the International Union of Railways, UIC, the International Association of Public Transport, UITP, European Cyclists Federation, ECF, WOC21, and Asociación Sustentar. We thank you and the UNFCCC Secretariat to giving us the opportunity to be here and host and organize this event. And a special thanks to all the speakers that are going to be joining this stage. So today we will engage in a discussion with our invited panelists about the importance of active travel, public and shared transport in achieving our climate goals and shifting a new paradigm of sustainable mobility. At last year's COP26, there was a lot of pressure from the advocacy groups led to the last-minute insertion of the Transport Declaration, which stated that we recognize that alongside the shift to zero-emission vehicles and sustainable future for road transport will require wider system transformation, including support to active travel, public and shared transport, as well as addressing the full value chain impacts for vehicle production, use, and disposal. This session brings together policymakers, advocates, and members of the business community to share their perspectives on how best to achieve and share some good examples what's being done around the world to transform mobility. We expect that towards the end we will have some time for a Q&A session and finally draw some reflections from this conversation. We encourage the people in the audience to write down any questions that you may want to raise at the end, as well as the people that are joining the transmission of this session through the functionality that the Teams meeting provides. To open the session, we have the honor of having a keynote speaker here from a country who's taking the lead in transforming urban mobility, particularly looking into how to improve walkability, cycling, and access to shared and public transport services. So please let me invite at this stage and introduce Mr. Prudence Rubingisa, sorry for the pronunciation, Mayor of the city of Kiwali at Rwanda. So please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure. As she said, I'm called Prudence Rubingisa. I'm the mayor of the city of Kigali in Rwanda. Kigali is a capital city of Rwanda with close to 1.7 million inhabitants, well known as a green city, a resilient city. And I'm glad actually to be now adding my voice as a mayor of a city, but also having been given actually that chance to, with other peer mayors, to attend the COP27 and also be speaking from the grassroots level. For us, we are very close to the citizens. We feel all the climate change consequences as we are on the forefront, dealing with our peoples, our citizens, listening to them, their complaints, and also trying to find solutions. That is something that really we are grateful of. The urban transportation, actually, as you know, it poses definitely major challenges to sustainability goals, and also it continues to be the very fast growing source of carbon emissions in the world. we are definitely experiencing this in some of the municipalities, and this is also coupling to the urbanization process that is taking place, but also the rural-urban migration that is happening with projection, if our statistics are really reliable, that in 2030, our population in different cities will be tripled. You understand that this is actually going to create more problems if really we don't tackle those problems by now. And I'm glad this is a round table actually to discussing some of the issues and finding solutions. In response to that, a call for mobility shift and also away from our private car use towards high shares of walking, cycling, and also the public transport that has been definitely a routine in our daily businesses, and also to some extent it has adopted different levels of governance. I want to share some of the experiences, ladies and gentlemen, in addition to that we are facing in different countries, but also using my typical example in my own city. There's some of the solutions, in some cases actually we call them some homegrown solutions, because we've been waiting very long to get to actions. We've been having, today we are talking about the COP27, we've been having COP de Ville specifically for specific cities, and come up with a lot of proposed solutions, but to be honest with ourselves, those solutions are in our drawers. So time has come actually to move to actions. This led us to, in the city of Kigali, to come up with some of the solutions for us to shift from the combustion vehicles, this traditional way whereby someone has his own vehicle. Even in developing countries, it might be seen as actually a way of well-being, as opposed to someone migrating to public transport means. But unfortunately, the public transport is not a solution in its end currently, because people to be able to leave their vehicles at home and use the public transport, you understand a lot of expectations in terms of the service delivery, the timely of that service delivery, and actually the quality that is being found in those public transport means. Particularly in the city of Kigali, as I said, we've been implementing some initiatives. Currently, we have what is well known as car-free days, that is happening every 2 times a month, whereby the entire city networks are used by the pedestrians, a way of doing sports, but at the same time reducing the carbon emissions. And to tell you the truth, the demand is becoming very high, so that I feel the pressure from the citizens that they need more. That is actually a good solution that is also leading to a better life as a preventive medicine for non-communicable diseases. Another solution that we brought on board is also creating more car-free zones in the city of Kigali. So far, we've created different car-free zones that are definitely used by pedestrians, and at the beginning was very challenging, because it's another issue of mindset, especially in African countries. But this time around, we see that there is a need to expand some more. You understand that those are also creating a way of, migrating to another way of mobility in our cities, and more importantly, the cycling processes. By actually improving or upgrading our roads in the city, we make sure that every road has a pedestrian walkway and a cycling walkway, so that different users, the people walking, but also those using bicycles, can also find their ways. And I was sharing the experience with my sister here, Cecilia, that the demand is becoming again huge, that we actually need more bikes in our roads, because at a certain time in the road, you find that they are no longer bicycles because they have been taken away by the users. We are migrating definitely to the e-mobility by again bringing on board a certain number of electrical buses. We are very conscious that this is expensive, but it might be more expensive if we don't do it now. So as a sustainable solution, we need to make sure that as developing cities, urbanization goes away with improving the active mobility and also public transport as a way of tackling some of the climate issues. And as I said, those are the solutions on the table. We went through the trials in my city and it worked. We simply need now to expand that and also mobilize more resources to make sure that it goes even into some of the secondary cities and it is a solution to work. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak in this session, and I'll be very much open to take some questions later when after the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rubin. I guess this is a really good way to settle the stage, talking about some of the challenges, but also some of the actions and policies that we could be seeing as part of like shifting and the transport system into a more sustainable mobility system and regaining part of the space to the cars and the vehicles for the pedestrians and the cycling and the people that is willing to use the public transit system. So having said that, we are going to pass to the next part of this event, which is the first panel. To open, I'm going to intend to bring some of the voices that we have from the advocacy sphere, this community, to talk about the role of each of the modes in the transit and the mix of sustainable mobility systems, to tell us quite straightforward what we need to be achieved, what has to be done in order to effectively produce a significant shift towards sustainable mobility. So let's welcome to the stage Bronwen Thornton, CEO of Walk 21. Please come in. We also are going to welcome Mohamed Mezgahani, Secretary General of the International Association of Public Transport, UITP. Welcome. Jill Warren, she's CEO of the European Cyclists Federation, ECF. And last but not least, Francois Davenne, Director General of International Union of Railways, UIC. So thank you everyone for being here. I would like to start from Bronwen, and we can go on from here to the other end. And you can start talking about what needs to be done in terms of making more walkable cities and how this could be connected to the other modes. So to give a teaser to the rest of the panelists. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, there it is. Great. Thank you, Carolina. Hello, everybody, and this is my favorite collection of people on a panel because this is your new mobility paradigm, and this is what we're seeking to achieve. And I'm really glad that we're here together to have this conversation. And my focus is on the question of what needs to be done. It's very simple. We need to keep the people who are walking in the world already. So where there are big populations, high levels of walking, the 70% that we see in Africa and other countries, we need to value those and retain. I don't care if it's 70% or 50% or 60%, but we have to respect that walking is part of their journey and value that. And in other countries, we should have some ambitions to encourage people to walk more or to recognize the levels of walking that are there already, because for a very long time we haven't actually measured walking properly and therefore not understood it properly. And I'm going to talk about that particularly in relation to public transport. Why walking? Does it still need to be said? Sadly, it does still need to be said, but let's be very quick about why. Because it's who we are as human beings. It's how we move, it's how we interact, it's how we have always moved, and we are the indicator species for the quality of life in our cities. But let's talk more about enabling the elderly in our communities to access their local social life. Let's talk about children and independent travel and walking to school. And let's talk about our lively downtowns, our local shopping centres and our waterfront spaces. And it's easy to think that walking is a leisure activity, but walking is part of the transport system. And it always has been and it always will be. So we have to account for it, we have to invest in it, and we have to value it. Because the other thing that walking does is it can reduce the financial burden on households. We are in an energy crunch. We are in a climate crunch. The percentage of household budgets that are needed for transport go up every year because we are building in longer distance and more expensive ways of doing it. But by ensuring low carbon, low cost options are maximised, by building land use planning patterns that prioritise high density local neighbourhoods with pedestrian movement in those spaces, we can answer some of these questions all at the same time. So let me talk about my colleagues in public transport and this critical relationship. And with respect to my cycling friends, everyone always says, oh, active mobility and public transport. Well, we have a stronger relationship with public transport than most people would actually realise. The research actually shows if you ask people about their public transport journey, and I'm going to bring my numbers up on my screen so I don't get them wrong, 86% of urban transport, public transport journeys include at least 2 walking trips. Those trips have been ruled out by distance. Oh, it's too short, it doesn't count. But they are people on the street moving around in our local neighbourhoods. But when you ask people about those public transport journeys, 70% of what resonates in their satisfaction is the walking experience. That doesn't mean we can have rubbish buses. That doesn't mean we can have, poor timetables or, fare structures. But when you ask people about their experience, they talk about the walking component of the journey. 70% is what informs their satisfaction levels. This is something to value as part of a public transport system. And then the final critical factor when you're thinking about the two relationships is that very often in that, because we count by main mode, so we say, well, the bus is the main mode because it's the motorised one, 40 to 50% of travel time is actually spent on the walking components of that journey. Now, this is to take nothing from my public transport colleagues because I am trying to give them something. I am trying to give them, all of us as customer base, with walkable catchments, with safe and direct and quality space for them to access public transport. And the research shows that the walking journey is part of that. SDGs, target 11.2. It's a proximity to public transport target that we want people living within 500 metres of public transport. I really want this too. But what is not in that system is a measure of the quality of that experience. And the other thing that's not realised when we start talking about that is that that 500 metre catchment to public transport can deliver on broader community benefits to the services, shops, vitality, space. So not only can we improve connectivity and overall quality of the public realm to the public transport, we can do it for the entire neighbourhood around those stations as well. Because most of the people in that space are not on their way to somewhere else. They're actually living and working and functioning and taking children to school in those spaces. So this is a symbiotic relationship. This is not about just tunneling people onto buses or tunneling people off, but actually creating those catchments where people want to spend time. And by making improvements, if we need to use a public transport journey to make those improvements, then we can make, what's really magical is that we can make improvements to all of those neighbourhoods as well. One of the projects we're doing at Walk 21, we have a walkability app, and we developed it with the Alstom Foundation to improve this quality of service between the public transport journey starts at the front door. So what happens on that journey? And we did the first testing for this in Lagos, on a new bus station on Victoria Island, funded by the World Bank. If you're here, I'll happily have a conversation afterwards. No pedestrian access to a bus station. I'm not sure who they thought was going to actually come and catch their buses, but a 6-lane highway outside. And in doing the public transport analysis to that bus station, not only did we get new sidewalks built for people to go and catch the bus, they also could now walk safely to the local hospital that was in the same neighbourhood and to the local school. So these are the multiple layers of the win-win that comes. And if you start drawing circles around bus stops and bus stations, you're starting to cover a lot of your local neighbourhood. And the great thing about our app is that you can go back and measure the success of your interventions. So after we negotiated with the government to make changes in that environment, we went back and measured the impact and the satisfaction levels and the safety levels of the people using those spaces. It also is part of the transport mix. This is a really important thing. For years when I've been advocating for walking, people say, oh, all of the co-benefits, we should invest for transport, it will deliver health benefits, it will deliver social benefits. It does do all of those things, and we should cost all of those things into a system cost of a cost-benefit analysis for our transport programs. But it also delivers on those transport benefits, financially delivers on them. And so the Victorian government didn't do pedestrian catchment analysis, and the Victoria Walks analysed that and found they'd missed out on 1.3 billion of value in terms of customers coming to their stations. Washington DC did a full analysis of how to underpin the fiscal viability of their public transport service, and the number one intervention was to improve direct, safe walking access to their stations. And for every 10 houses they connected by walking to a public transport stop, this is low-density Washington, remember, this is not high-density Hong Kong. For every 10 houses, they got 7 more rides per week. That's a direct delivery of your customer base to your transport service. So we're not too small. The world reached 8 billion people today. That is a really big number, and that's who I represent, because that is all of us. At some time, and for most of our lives, we will be walkers in our local communities. We have to bring our national governments to the table. We're doing a project around the nationally determined contributions at the moment to bring that focus. Ireland is a fantastic example of a national government investing. And I want to finish on a national government frameworks. We are working with the Pan-European Partnership. Transport, Health and Environment have come together to invest in what's called a master plan for walking. There are 54 countries in the Pan-European region, and they have decided to develop a master plan for walking which will sit in parallel with their master plan for cycling and become a master plan for active mobility. We don't have very long to do this. But what's really exciting in this process, and we're working thanks to the Dutch government and to some of the other governments involved in the process, to bring the conversation and to bring the national governments with the Pan-European Master Plan and to do some capacity building and skills training within those national governments. So I'm really delighted to be announcing today, as to close off my intervention here, is that we have a new initiative with the Partnership for the Volvo Research and Educational Foundations, known as the VREF, to build capacity for better walking policy, especially at this national level. So as part of this pan-European process for delivering on this master plan, we are going to be running online training throughout next year for all of the national officers within those governments to participate. Not only are we going to be running the training with those officers while they're developing their plans to inform the master plan, see how all these pieces go together, it's like a multimodal journey, but the VREF Foundation is funding us to evaluate and do the academic research around that so that we can capture the learnings and build on those successes. And then after this process, we can roll this training out to national governments undertaking other national policy development programs, one of which we're already engaged in the African context. So we are really excited about that. We have a press release that has gone out today. This will be happening between March and June next year. The 56 countries from the Pan-European region will be attending, but we will be looking to engage with others as soon as we can after that. It's a critical component, and I'm going to finish here because my colleague Jill is going to talk about our PATH initiative, which is all part of this focus and investment on walking and cycling. Thank you very much for your time. My final remark, and I'm delighted that the Mayor of Kigali was here, because Kigali is going to be where we host the Walk 21 conference next year. It's our first in Africa, and it brings this focus to walking to that continent for the first time, and we're absolutely delighted about that. So if you want to continue this conversation with us, please, we look forward to seeing you in Kigali in October next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Bronwen. And I'm going to pass to Mohamed to see what you have to say about public transit, since it's been already mentioned and what we heard.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good afternoon. First, I agree with everything you said, Bronwen, and I must say, in UITP we are working on what we call the redefinition of public transport, and it's about considering public transport not only station to station but door to door, and there where working will take even more dimension. So we want really that mobility agencies, transport operators, they don't only consider the public transport mode, but they consider the whole door-to-door mobility. And so I'm very happy.
This is why we sit together.
Indeed. So, and now the challenge is to say something different from what I said this morning, because I see a lot of people were there this morning as well. I would like to start by reminding four main figures. The first one is obvious, you know it all, but it's good to remind what is at stake. I mean, transport represents 30% CO2 emissions, but it's the sector with the fastest growth of CO2 emissions, and this is what makes the situation more complex. 70% of the transport emissions take place in cities, and 33% of the cities emissions 33% of the city's emissions are linked to transport. So there is the critical link between transport and cities. And I will end the fourth figures, which is cars represent 50% of the transport emissions. So we see not only how critical is urban mobility for our city's objective, but also that the cities have many significant opportunities for emission reductions in the transport sector, but in many cases they are not taking advantage of that. I mean, they know when we talk to cities, you know, the diagnosis, we share views on the diagnosis, but then why there are some cities moving and others not doing anything, and that's one of the challenges we have. So I would say, and we know the solution. I mean, when you listen to these figures, the solution is about reducing or controlling the use of cars. It's about deprioritizing private cars, and regardless of their energy or of the fuel they use. I mean, even if they are electric, and I know that I said that many times. I mean, a clean traffic jam is still a traffic jam. And I don't think someone will be happier in an electric car stuck in a traffic jam. It will be the same, you know, feeling. So, and this is something we need to consider. And if we embark in this approach to reduce the use of cars or to limit the use of cars, we can reduce the transport emissions, urban transport emissions, by 50% at the end of the decade. So that's what is at stake is really important. And I would say, you know, I have been working now for 35 years in energy efficiency in transport, and we have to go back to the basics. I know that some stakeholders, they are trying to divert our attention to focus more on technology, to focus more on electrification, but really we have to go back to the basics. And what we were saying 35 years ago is still valid now. And so first is about prioritizing, you know, walkable streets. That's the must. I mean, if everyone could walk, we don't need any other modes, and everyone will be happy, and the air will be clean, and the impact on health and on the economy will be even much better. And if we want to prioritize the walking, cycling, and of course public transport as a backbone, we need transport authorities. That's something which is not developed enough in the world. There are some countries who have transport authorities, and I said transport authority, I didn't say public transport authority, because we should aim to include all modes, if possible, of course, so, and have an integrated approach to transport. So, and this transport authority, now I am Since yesterday morning, I had, I think, 8 or 10 meetings, and in each meeting we speak about transport authorities with different stakeholders. So that's a must, and there are many good examples in the world, and I think we can get inspiration from these examples. And what's good is that those examples are not the exclusivity of more industrialized countries or more Western countries. No, they are in the south, in the north, they are in east and west, and the big and small countries, and that's important. I mean, from Singapore to London, to Lagos, to Johannesburg, to Jakarta, etc. So that's the first priority. The second is to guarantee the financial incentives and the regulatory framework for an emission transition. So our sector, of course, is committed to achieve the zero emission and in the public transport, and so governments, they need to support this approach. It can't happen, you know, because decision was taken that it's a priority. The government should support this by also assisting with the procurement of cleaner public transport vehicles and services to speed up this transition. So, and we should not, and I repeat it again, we should not just look at the technology solution. We should look beyond just technological solutions and design, you know, proper financial measures to encourage this switch and this transition to cleaner technologies. And then the third is to ensure also that this, once we decide, I would say, once it is decided to have, let's say, electrification, it's important that it comes also from clean energy sources. If it is from solar, from wind, from really zero emission energy, because we are talking here about global emissions and not only air quality in cities. And so energy and transport, of course, they go hand in hand, and this decarbonization will only happen if there is a modal shift. And I will not repeat again, avoid, shift, improve. So the improve comes after shift, and that's important. It's first avoid, and you mentioned the land use planning, which is a key, which is important, and then shifting towards modes which are cleaner, walking, cycling, and public transport and shared mobility, and then, you know, improving, of course, the energy efficiency and the emissions efficiency of the different modes. And as you said, there is nothing new, but if we haven't, though we knew the solutions, and if they were not implemented, it's because there is a lack of political will. And this, I am happy to hear the mayor of Kigali and expressing, you know, that the population is requesting more car-free days, you see. And sometimes the policymakers, they consider that they don't dare enough because they are afraid of their population. But actually the population sometimes has a higher awareness than the policymakers. So this political will is important, is essential. I am happy to see also that Egypt has, you know, put public transport on the agenda, and that's excellent. And I look forward to the Solution Day on Thursday to hear more about that and to contribute to the discussion. But when I look around here in the national pavilions, who saw anything about urban mobility? In the urban pavilions, exposed, you know, some achievements, some projects, some metro systems, BRT systems, etc. Here in the pavilions. There are a lot about technologies, about agriculture, about health, about I don't know, even space, you know, but nothing about urban mobility. Or I will mention one example, which is an excellent one, and especially I visited the Emirates Pavilion. They will be hosting the COP28 next year, and you will see a big model of a plane there on the Emirates Pavilion. It's a pity because they have very good cases they could promote. I mean, the metro in Dubai is one of the most efficient in the world, the bus system in Dubai. But it's like they are not proud of showing this. But there is one very good example. It's Senegal. If you go to the pavilion of Senegal, and you will see a big wall with the regional train, the new regional train, and the BRT system that they are building. And it means that they understood that it's about model shift, it's not just about technologies. And I wanted to mention this because really it's not the first time that in COP we don't see enough of transport. And I am going to conclude because I am optimistic. So it's not because I don't see this here that I will change my mind. I am optimistic. And it's still time, I would say, because in the 2025, the countries, there is a next round for the NDC submissions, and it's still time to include public transport in these submissions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for complementing what we are building up as a system and a mix of mobility options and alternatives as an integrated and low-carbon system. So I want to pass to Jill to talk about cycling. It's the other side of the active mobility equation.
Thank you, Carolina. So I want to say a few words about what needs to be done for cycling. So yes, there has been quite a boom for cycling the past few years, and a lot has been written about and said about it, but there's still a lot more to do. First of all, we need to treat cycling as a fully fledged mode of transport. Most of the time, this is not the case. And because it's not the case, cycling doesn't get the priority it deserves as a sustainable and healthy means of transport and leisure, but also as one of the fastest and most efficient solutions we already have to decarbonize transport and to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. We need strategies, we need policies, we need visibility of cycling as a mode of transport, and that means collecting proper data on it and no longer having the excuse that, well, we don't invest in it because we don't know what the situation is or how much we should be investing, etc. We need funding, and we need a lot more funding. Our recommendation is that countries should be spending 10% of their national transport budgets on cycling. We only know of one country that's doing that, Ireland. They're spending 10% on walking and 10% on cycling. And in that relatively small country, that adds up to 1 million euros a day spent on walking and cycling. Be like Ireland. So the number one reason that people give for not cycling or not cycling more is the feeling of safety. So that means we need to invest first and foremost in safe, attractive, convenient infrastructure so that people will use it. We need to rebalance the existing transport infrastructure to have more public space for walking, cycling, and public transport, less space for private motorized vehicle transport. That is what it means. In a city like Brussels, where I live, 70% of public space is for cars, whether moving or parked. 70%. So don't tell me there's no space for a bike lane or more, pedestrian zones or something. It's there. You just have to reprioritize it. That also means we need to de-incentivize car travel. So whether it's through congestion zones, higher road tax, less parking, more expensive parking, however we do that, that has to be part of the equation as well. If we want that shift, then we have to do these things to, really nudge and achieve that shift. We also want cycling to be integrated into major infrastructure projects. If you're building a high-speed rail line, don't cut off existing cycle paths while doing it, and even better, build a cycle highway next to that high-speed rail line. Something else that we haven't talked about here yet, which I think is important, we also need to support the innovation and growth of the cycling industry. Because, for goodness sake, we've been doing that for years and years and years for the automotive industry and for aviation and for shipping and everything else. And, we need that also to make sure that we have a viable, healthy, productive cycling industry that supports the growth of cycling. Just to conclude, I want to talk about this new initiative that Bronwen alluded to. So earlier this year, several NGOs that work in the walking and cycling space came together with the support of the FIA Foundation to form PATH, the Partnership for Active Travel and Health, because we felt that walking and cycling were very much under-prioritized, underfunded parts of the transport and mobility mix. We wanted to draw attention to this. We wanted to use this as a platform to call on governments and cities to make a real commitment to walking and cycling, to help unlock the potential, the further enormous potential of walking and cycling, to accelerate the achievement of climate goals, to improve people's lives, and to deliver all these other co-benefits that we know that walking and cycling can do. So we have also commissioned a headline report that brings together a lot of really, really good existing work out there produced by members of the PATH Coalition and others to make the case for walking and cycling. So the report is called Make Way for Walking and Cycling, and we'll be very happy to help you have a look at that. The website is pathforwalkingcycling.com, and my colleague Frozo in the audience here, she's got a QR code that will take you right to it if you'd like to see her afterwards. But just to conclude, on the occasion of COP27, we issued a joint letter, which first and foremost was signed by all of the 14 PATH Coalition members, but also to date, and Frozo, correct me if I'm wrong, but at last count, we had 355 NGOs sign on to this letter that calls on cities and governments to commit to prioritizing and investing in walking and cycling through 5 key measures. So we want them to have concrete actions in the areas of infrastructure to make walking and cycling safe, accessible, and easy to do. Campaigns to support the shift in mobility habits that we need, land use planning to ensure proximity and quality of access to everyday services on foot and by bike, integration with public transport to underpin sustainable mobility for trips both short and long, capacity building to enable the successful delivery of effective walking and cycling strategies that have measurable impact. And we really hope that more countries and cities take note and that walking and cycling become a much bigger part of the conversations and the action happening going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jill. So just to add to the mix, the last piece of it, we want to hear from Francois about the rails into all this system.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's quite difficult to intervene after the distinguished speaker. Well, basically, I will say the same than Mohamed. Well, I think I can agree to everything that was said, and in fact, all the practical solutions that were discussed today are perfectly okay. I will perhaps try to divert a little bit because at the end of the day, railways will be the backbone of all of that. That means that we will be the core of the network if indeed there is a very strong development of urban transport, because in a way, railways are a part of public transport, of urban transport, urban public transport, cycling and walking. We will need to have a revolution in railways. We need to have more capacity. We need to have a lot of very important change. But here, what I will try to focus on, what is left to me after the very brilliant speech of my predecessor. First of all, I will try to do a little bit of philosophy. Then I will be speaking about finance, and I will conclude on practicalities. So I will start with a little bit of political philosophy. As you know, it's not a new thing that at the end of the day, the proliferation of cars in our city is completely changing our society and our life in urban area. Hearing my predecessor, I remember of a book, perhaps you know André Gorce, it's writer on ecology, a French writer on ecology, and he did a couple of years ago a very funny article that was called The Social Ideology of Cars. And, well, it's a joke, obviously, but the core of the joke is to say that basically having a car is a very good thing. It's like to have a villa on the Riviera. It's extremely enjoyable. You can indeed drive fast and you can enjoy a lot, but you can have a villa on the Riviera for everybody. It just doesn't work. You cannot build a society on everybody having a villa on the Riviera. So you need to build a society on cycling, walking, public transport and railways. And that's exactly where we are today. And I will take another argument that Mohamed Mezgahani also explained, is that, well, we all are thinking that we are living an era of a very rapid scientific progress. It's just not true. There is no big innovation in energy production since, well, basically the nuclear plants in the 50s. Solar panel, well, the technology is improving, but there is absolutely no revolution. So that means that in the next 10 years, and we need to work in the next 10 years, no technology will save us. There will be no technologies that will come and save us, like fusion or things like that. That will be an actual scientific revolution, and we will have then actual clean energy, but there is no prospect that there will be industrial fusion in the next 10 years. So we will need to use what is existing. And what is existing is cycling, walking, public transport, and modal shift. And that will finish my philosophical 3 minutes. We need to change our habits. And for changing that, we indeed will need to massively redirect financing into this kind of, let's say, relatively traditional way of transporting people and goods. And, well, it's not necessarily a drama because it was said repeatedly what we are suffering in terms of our day-to-day life problems. We are suffering about congestion, we are suffering about pollution, we are suffering about the fact that the public space are increasingly scarce in our big cities. But all of that could be solved with a little bit of frugality. In French, we would say sobriety, but I think in English it's more towards alcoholic beverage, to not use alcoholic beverage. But perhaps I will continue with sobriety, because at the end of the day, we are using too much very energy-intensive liquids like gas and other fossil fuels, because they are incredibly energy intensive. And we are, in a way, in some state where we are drinking too much energy, using too much energy day to day, and we need to go to a transport paradigm where the key feature will be to be more frugal. What is more frugal than walking, that cycling, that using public transport? I also agree that we should need to have a little bit more applied research to be sure that indeed we can reduce the cost, because we are still relatively expensive, and that is quite true for railways, because basically 1 kilometer of railways is 20 million euros. So if we want to have more people on public transport and at the end of the day on rail, because we will be, and we are the backbone, we will need to invest a lot. So we need to have research to make it easier to use railways and public transport. And also, since I am cycling since 20 years in Paris, I also agree that we should make more research into cycling, because, well, basically, except for electric bicycles that are becoming to be increasingly easy to use, we didn't really innovate for bicycle. And I think that will be really interesting to see what we can do. And then I will come to practicalities. That will be the last part of my speech. Indeed, UIC, well, it's our centenary this year, and you are issuing a manifesto which is basically around this very subject, how we can have a desirable future that is based on frugality and on public transport and on active transport. But for achieving that, we need to be very practical. And UIC traditionally is issuing operational standards, operational guidelines and specifications. And you will be surprised to learn that we don't have any guidelines or leaflets that is about what is a station, a train station. How do we integrate precisely public transport into station? How do we integrate station into public space? So these are the very subjects we are working on. So we have a new work stream within UIC which is about stations. That's a global work stream. And I was surprised, but indeed we have a very large international interest on that. And I was listening to the mayor of Kigali. Indeed, everything is about practicality. If you want people to walk, you need to respond to very simple things. You have children, you have package. How do you get into your public transport system? You have a bicycle. Where do you put your bicycle? Where do you take your bicycle? Could you take your bicycle in public transport? That's all those questions we need absolutely to respond, because at the end of the day, what will make the difference is the practicality, how we organize together to be as practical as possible, respecting the differences, because living in Kigali is not exactly the same than living in Paris or living in Cairo. And we need to make an exchange of experience. And I will terminate here. UIC is a global organization, and we are members basically everywhere in Africa, South America, Middle East, Asia. And I don't know really what is the meaning of Global South. Well, if you just say Global North, you will understand that Global South doesn't really have a meaning. And but what I believe really very much is that we need to exchange together experience to see how we found solutions. And I think that solutions that are found in Africa, that are found in Asia, that are found in South America can be used in the more developed country and vice versa. We need to exchange, we need to find practical guidelines to implement this. That will be quite a revolution. Thank you, that will be my conclusion.
Thank you so much, Francois. I think this gives us an overarching view of all the modes that we should be prioritizing and how we should be combining the efforts in one mode and another to have an integral, sustainable mobility system. So we are going to pass to the next panel. We are running a little bit late on our agenda. So let's talk now about how we actually deliver this. So I'm going to invite to the stage three more panelists. So Cecilia Andersson, she's head of the Urban Mobility UN Habitat. Hugo Salamaneo Franca, coordinator of Multilateral Affairs and City Networks, Municipal Department of International Relations, the City of Sao Paulo. And Cecile Texier, head of CSR Alstom Transport. And again, please, you can join this panel to also add to this conversation. Oh, you can sit, sorry, take the seats wherever you like. No problems there. So I'm going to start with Hugo to hear another example of what a city level actionable plan could look like. And I'm going to ask you if you have specific examples from your work at the city level and how to deliver public transport and active mobility, and how that you can produce key positive impacts in economy, in health, in climate and social development.
Thank you very much, Carolina, and well, good afternoon. I'm Hugo Solomon, Coordinator of Multilateral Affairs of the City of São Paulo, and on behalf of the city, I would like to greet my fellow panelists and the audience, and thank you also for the opportunity to be here. Bringing local governments to this table, to this discussion, is key if we really want to address and to build ambitious and effective action. As all of you might be aware, without the strong engagement of the urban centers, reaching our NDCs and also the commitments of the Paris Agreement won't stand a chance. But, well, talking specifically about the city, São Paulo is the biggest urban center in the Southern Hemisphere and in Latin America, with more than 23 million inhabitants in the metropolitan region, and obviously we have a crucial role to play. The transport sector is responsible for the majority of our greenhouse gas emissions, corresponding to approximately 61% of it. So mitigating its impacts is key if we really want to build a net zero city. We have around 14,000 buses, which makes the decarbonization process a great challenge. And starting in 2019, we are committed to only have clean vehicles by 2038. And also aligned with that strategy, we have been seeking to promote active mobility, mainly by building bike lanes across the city. We currently have 167 kilometers of built lanes, and by the end of 2024, we plan to add more 300 kilometers to the biking infrastructure. And by doing so, we foster new investments in the new and sustainable economy, improving also the citizens' health, the quality of life, and also tackling climate change in this that is our major sector for the emissions of greenhouse gas emissions. So, back to you, Carolina.
Thank you, Hugh. So I'm going to ask now Cecilia to see if you can give us a more broader perspective from the work that you do at the UN, and what other examples you can bring to the table of how we can actually deliver results on these other aspects, right? Like not only on the operative and lowering the emissions, but also how we can co-benefit in terms of economy, social development, and health.
No, thank you very much. And I actually so enjoyed the panel before, where you actually bring all the different modes of transport together. And I think that that's absolutely key when you're looking at a city. And I think those are the examples that I actually appreciate the most, where you have the different modes of transport actually being accommodated and brought together. So it's that integrated approach of being able to plan sustainably those kind of initiatives. And that really happens at the city level. So, you know, the entry point is the city, and it's the different neighborhoods. It's actually ensuring that connectivity between the different neighborhoods. And there's some wonderful examples across the world of how that is actually taking place. I think this morning, many of you actually listened to the Dar es Salaam Rapid Transit System. And they have actually invested in this bus rapid transit line, but they've also actually taken into consideration the walking and cycling infrastructure, how people actually connect to the stations. They're looking at the connectivity, that last mile connectivity from the stations to the home. And there's a small project which is actually looking at tuk-tuks or e-bajaji, as they call it there, in trying to be able to connect stations to the home and being able to support deliveries, for example, or taking passengers from the station to their home. So I think that sort of integrated thinking is so important. There's also actually a lovely example in Belo Horizonte, which was one of the projects under the Urban Pathways supported by the ICI initiative, which also brought together different communities. It brought together people from the community to look into actually creating cycle lanes and walkways and reclaiming the streets, but also actually looking at how that is connected then with public transport. Another super initiative that I absolutely adore is actually in Nairobi where I live. It's Luthuli Avenue, and it took many years, but we actually inspired the city to convert a street. And the idea was that it would be a partial pedestrianization. In the end, it has turned out to be a full pedestrianization because the businesses along that street have actually seen an increase of business of about 40%. So they actually want pedestrianization. They want people to actually be able to roam around the street and ensure that they can enjoy that life. And now the city actually would like to expand that to more streets. And the idea is also to see how, the streets can also then actually connect with the river. So it also brings and down at the river there's a transit hub where all the public transport operators actually then will be able to then ferry their people back and forth. So it's really about that integrated thinking, bringing it all together on the city level and being able to ensure that we take into consideration all the different modes of transport in those initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. You actually brought some of the questions that I have for later, so kind of a spoiler. But I want to go to Cecile just to talk a little bit from the private perspective and like what Alstom is doing actually and the examples you can give for delivering these kind of results.
Thank you. I can only subscribe to what have been said before by the first panel, so I'm not going to repeat everything, but I believe that in cities, public transport together with active mobility should be the backbone of mobility. And in Africa as well, rail has a great potential to deliver decarbonization of transport together with other socio-economic benefits. We commissioned Ernst & Young to complete a survey to explore this potential. And the outcome of the survey was that 1 gigatons of CO2 emissions could be avoided by 2050 if we were able to increase the modal share of urban rail transport to 10% by 2030 and 20% in 2050, which is feasible with appropriate transport system. This would generate additional benefits through job creation. For example, for each kilometer of urban rail in Africa, we would be able to create 258 jobs, either in construction and operation phases. And for the project happening in Cairo, the new metro line 4 and 6 and the new monorail, it was estimated that 11,000 jobs could be created, 7,000 during construction and 4,000 during operation, while avoiding 32 million tons of CO2 by 2050. A urban transport project can also limit congestion, as it was said by Mohamed and Francois. Our study estimates that by 2050, we could take off-road 30 million cars per day, which will have obviously positive impact on congestion, on road accident and air pollution. And it's fair to note that today in Cairo, congestion is costing $8 billion US per year. If I may quote a couple of existing examples, tramway projects provide great opportunity to enhance the urban landscape, to redefine travel routes, to increase the pedestrian spaces, and to promote soft mobility modes. This is what happened, for example, in Rio de Janeiro, in Rabat, in Casablanca, in Morocco, where Alstom delivered 2 turnkey projects. And we got a socio-economic assessment by the Agence Française de Développement, that demonstrated that for people living in the area where the tram is accessible, the tramway is actually capturing 10 to 35% of home to study or home to work journeys. And these projects have a specific benefit in terms of inclusivity because women are largely using the tram, even more than men. For women, it's 14% of their travels that are done through the tramway, when it's only 8% by men. More than 80% of the residents have also said that project improved walkability because of the enhanced footpaths, because of the reduced pollution and noise level, and also the area is much safer, especially at night. So the tramway has built the trust, let's say, with quality of service, reliability, safety. It is considered as a quick and cheap option. It is said to be qualitative transport as good as cars, which allow modal shift, with specific benefits for women. Today, the proximity of tramway line is becoming a criteria of choice when people are deciding where to live or when selecting a job. And this is starting the installation of new population and new business in the areas as well. And if I may add another example, I could also mention the project we are delivering in South Africa for Prasa, where Mark here was the managing director. We are building 600 suburban trains over 10 years with a quite unique setup in terms of socio-economic development. We are bringing actually much more than trains to South Africa with specific efforts to the development of local supply chain. We need to achieve more than 65% local content. We have also built a new factory. We have renovated another factory, creating more than 1,500 jobs. And we're also putting a lot of efforts in developing the local workforce, so massive investment in training with more than 20,000 people that are going to be trained by the end of the project. And I think I stopped there.
Thank you, Cecile. So I'm going to give the space to Prudence, and linking all what we heard right now, I was wondering, and then I'll go back also to Hugo, to see what's your perspective from the public sector, being a representative from a local government, like in terms of like what you think it could be done from your role in terms of like linking and facilitating the work with the other sectors, either the advocacy sector, the private sector, the multilateral and international organizations too. So you can all jointly deliver on these things.
Thank you so much, Moderator. I think from the local government perspective, as I was saying, that we are very close to the citizens. The very first thing we need now to be strategic in finding solutions. What I mean here is we've been quite reactive to situations, like sitting and when it happens that we found that there is a lot of pollution in our cities, a lot of traffic jam, and people need to move, and good quality of public transport, and at the end of the day, we found ourselves not having really tips to make sure that we have solutions. Now here, I would suggest that we need to sit down with all players. We've had previously a panel of practitioners that are operating in this sector. We've had the central governments that are providing us support from policy point of view, but also with means, but that are not very sufficient. Now, coming with the all practitioners, we found solutions. However, we need now to translate to actions, as I was saying. I think the next second point I would think from the local government point of view is now to make sure that actions should happen now. Because, as I said, there is this rural-urban mobility, there is a pollution. We've got most of our cities, especially, as I said, the developing cities, are populated with informal settlements. So we need to make sure that the non-motorized transport in those informal settlements is promoted as a solution. What do you mean here? As we are upgrading the informal settlements, we provide everything that is needed for the population in that same neighborhood. That is schools, the basic infrastructure, hospitals or health centers, churches for those who go there, and everything is provided for. Therefore, people can move easily, in the same neighborhood. The third point, I think, is to be as inclusive as possible, because we need to make sure that even those with the very minimum or little means find their places in the same neighborhood, either for moving easily. Even if they don't have means, they can walk, but eventually we provide the basic infrastructure. But also if there is a public bus that is available at a very affordable price for them to be able to move as well. And also those bikes that are being put in place. If you allow, with a few minutes probably left, I've been seeing what we are doing. For instance, if we say that, I can give a simple example. In my country, you happened actually to adjust the master plan for the city. That is inclusive, but also at the same time, that is promoting the e-mobility systems that are in place. We based on the available data, we've realized that we can also be efficient enough and have the accurate and timely data. Because when you live, for those who have been in Kigali, or those who are, you'll probably be able to navigate and see how it looks like. Indeed, it is a very green city with a lot of trees and everything, but it is again polluted. What is happening is what has been said in the previous panel. The buses, motorcycles are polluting enough. So therefore we need to migrate and minimize that by having a non-motorized transport systems, by allowing the infrastructure, as I said, with the load that we are constructing, but at the same time, make sure that we don't leave anyone behind. The inclusiveness. Thank you so much.
Thank you, viewers. So going back to Hugo, since you are in a position where you actually you have to coordinate from multiple sides of the agenda of the Sao Paulo city, I wonder if you can give us your perspective on how governments, private sector, all the actors that Prudence was talking about could work in tandem so we can actually deliver some of the solutions we were hearing about.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Well, in my perspective, governments have the main role to provide the necessary infrastructure to, foster this clean and active mobility. And in São Paulo, we have been fostering strong commitments, taking collaboration with both civil society and private sector, always when possible. First, the civil society. This is certainly one of the main driving forces for the city's commitments regarding public transportation. And I think mainly by two main strategies. The first one, managing public opinion and putting pressure on elected officials. So by doing so, we have been able to move forward much faster than usual. First point. The second, with the private sector. Especially in Brazil, the transportation sector is, the dialogue usually doesn't flow so smoothly. I don't know if it's the same in other countries. But, at the end, they have to understand their role, they have to adapt the operations and, in accordance to the laws and the rules that we establish for the municipal level. And more than that, I would say that a continuous communication on the importance of the public transportation and active mobility, mainly with civil society, so citizens don't increase the use of private vehicles, especially after the pandemic. Back to you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. So I was wondering if you can, Cecile, answer to that a little bit and see how do you see, the private sector actually taking the lead and maybe working with the government in terms of delivering these kind of projects you were talking about before, and what do you think it's the main strategy or approach we could work together?
Where we could work more together, I think, would be to build the capacity that is required to deliver projects. So for this, we can take quite a customized approach. In some cases, what is needed or what is wanted by the local authorities is to build capacity of training, to training the local workforce. In other cases, we are asked to have local factories. We can also work on developing the local supply chain. We can also work on technology transfer. So this approach can be adapted quite in accordance with the local authorities in order to have a win-win situation. The other point where I think we could work better together is about financing, because actually I believe there is a potential to leverage more climate finance. Especially in Europe now we have the European taxonomy for sustainable activities, and this is putting a lot of focus on redirecting finance to projects that are demonstrating low carbon and decarbonization. So here I think there is quite a lot of potential. At Alstom we can help with the facilitation. We do have a project export finance team. We have support from France as well, and for example for Cairo Line 1 we facilitated the access to financing. Altogether, maybe a final point, I think government, civil society and the private sector, we will need to advocate more for active mobility. It's true, we advocate for public transport, but we should actually advocate for public transport and active mobility, putting forward the decarbonization benefits and also the well-being. And this way we can increase together the awareness among the public and enhance the use of public transport.
Thank you. So, Cecilia, maybe you can also add to this, because we heard there is a lot for working together, for like unlocking some of the resources we have through integrating some of the actions we have across sectors. So I wonder if you can add a little bit more on what you think each sector should do after what we heard from the public and the private.
No, thank you very much. And I think a lot of the time the different sectors may not always talk together. So having that platform of actually being able to come together and to talk and to actually discuss some of these issues, I think are really important. I think the government should be in the lead. You should be leading the processes. So, for me, I would actually propose, we've been working a little bit innovatively with something what we call living labs, which brings together sort of academia, private sector, more from sort of the innovation side, and government to actually come up with some innovative solutions to some of the challenges that they're facing. But I think being able to facilitate that dialogue and to be able to create those platforms is extremely essential, and being able to see how government actually leads those processes, sets the standards. I think a lot of the times, I'm just talking from a bit of experience from before, when we were actually in a city and we were approached and they said, we are approached by private sector, but sometimes we don't have the tools or the standards or the guides in how to actually collaborate or how to work together. So it's actually about setting those standards and supporting in that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. So we are running short of time. So before jumping into the last question for all of you, I wonder if there is any question from the floor or either on online participation. If not, there's one there. Can you speak up or come closer? Oh, yeah.
Hi, my name is Leonard Naut from the Transport Decarbonization Alliance. We're one of those platforms where cities, regions and companies come together to decarbonize the transportation sector. But my question is more broadly, if we have this forum here at COP27, how can we escalate this to COP28 and have this extremely important topic with a lot of really good stories from all around the world that we may not be able to share at a wider platform than this audience today? How can we make that a reality? Do we need an urban mobility pavilion in the big room, or how do we elevate this discussion for next year?
Thank you. I wonder if any of you wants to take on that question.
Okay, maybe I'll answer then. I actually do think that's a very good idea, but I think it's not only to have the discussion at the COP. I think it's really important to have this discussion continuously. So maybe there's a sort of a platform that can be established where this can be a continuous dialogue that can be taken forward. Because I think, yes, it's really important to have it at the COP, but it's just as important to have it on the local level in the cities. It's just as important to have it at any other sort of big international affair to be able to take these things forward. So if you have any brainwaves on that front, that would be super.
Thank you. I don't know, here you are.
Yes, thank you for giving me the floor. Marc Granger from Alstom, so I'm here to support Cecile, but not only. And I wanted to rebound on one sentence you pronounced, Cecilia, at the early beginning of your speech, when you were highlighting the powerfulness of integrating the different transport modes in a city. And I could address my question to the previous panelist as well, but we've developed within Alstom a solution that that is named Mastria, which is a kind of software that is capable to grab a lot of data from different transport modes in order to provide to the transport authority a tool to arbitrate or to react on non-foreseeable situation when there is an accident or where there is a specific event, when the traffic jam is growing up abnormally, to be capable to know what's happened, where it is happening, what are the different transport modes that may be put in place in order to avoid congestions. And we invested in that years ago, and unfortunately we have not found any real appetite for that. And the reason is that there's not a value for it. The reason is there's nobody really taking care of the consolidation of the different transport modes all together within a city or within a region. So maybe it could be a question to, we have the chance to have a mayor of a large city in Africa. I don't know how you would react to a solution that could provide you how to better orchestrate the different transport modes from buses to tramways or BRT or whatever else you may have as available.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much for the question. As I was saying, we first of all need to have data and understand the needs on the ground, but also contextualize with what is happening. We've been trying a lot of solutions. We even thought about the tramways, which definitely cannot be a solution given the landscaping of my city. We are thinking now about how do we call it, the cable cars. But yes, an actual integrated transport mode is the solution. However, how do we sequence the implementation of it in the real sense of the actions? We have buses as a way of public transport, and as a case study, in my country we also have motorcycles that we are trying to phase out because it's not really an option as we promote the cycling, and all these is, as has been shown, contributing definitely to the emissions of carbon. Now, to respond to the needs of our people, I think the integrated solution that is optimal is to having of course, the BRT as a solution with the dedicated bus lane, at the same time coming up with the non-motorized transport that is also bringing on board the electrical buses, other even vehicles in general. As I think, as an example, when we were hosting previously in July the Commonwealth meeting in my city, we definitely used the 400 vehicles that are electrical. We found that is a solution. And in our database, we could even be able to monitor and see the contribution in reducing the emissions in the air. So to sum up, the recommended integrated systems should be definitely the public transport that I insist that is very inclusive, but also making sure that we have a phasing as we migrate to electrical vehicles. I still believe that is the solution as far as the cities that are really congested, that keeps attracting people are concerned. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I guess just for the sake of time, I want to ask you one last question. I'm going to ask you to be really brief because we have heard a lot of things in this conversation today. So for each of you, if you can give one simple, actionable recommendation for all the colleagues, either from the public or the private sector, from the organizations, the advocacy community, what's one recommendation you can give us to keep thinking and working on integrating public transport and active mobility as the backbone of our mobility systems? Maybe we can start with Hugo, if you can give one recommendation really quick, and then go from there to this side of the room.
Okay, great. Well, another brand new and great example of projects like this in São Paulo is the project Aquático SP, our first experience in low-emission public transportation on water, with the use of boats fully integrated with a bus transportation system. And this project starts and talking also about climate justice in a very vulnerable area of the city, where people can take up to 2 hours to go to this location, to the city center, and the goal is to significantly reduce the time in public transportation up to 70%, fostering not only the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but also the life quality of our citizens. And from a local perspective, I believe that engaging the community and all the stakeholders in the decision-making process might be the most cost-effective and inexpensive way to foster a new mobility paradigm in the cities. And well, these are some of the examples of policies that we've been implementing in our city, and in order for us to reach our climate goals and our net zero city by 2050. So again, thank you very much. It was an honor, and back to you.
Cecile, you want to take the next?
Okay, you want me to take over? My recommendation is do not delay action. I would say any investment to increase or to improve urban rail mobility option is a step in the right direction. It is possible to renovate some of the existing networks that are underutilized. It is possible maybe to consider to purchase second-hand trains, because we want to launch operation faster and cheaper, while at the same time considering further expansion and further improvement in the future. I think this is what Kenya is doing, for example. But do no delay action. That's a quick recommendation.
Perfect. Maybe that's the teaser for the mayor to see what's his recommendation.
I want to concur with what my sister here is saying. Action, action, action now. And also number two is to bring all practitioners on a table to find solutions, including financing, because most of the cities, especially the most vulnerable cities, have got their roads, have got their existing infrastructure destroyed by the current climate change issues. So telling them they need to come up with nice roads with cycling lanes and so on and so forth might also be difficult. So they need to get funding, raise funding to adapt to the current situation. And number three, government should be the lead as far as the active mobility and the public transport is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. And Cecilia, maybe to close.
Yes, absolutely. I just concur. Action, action, action. But I loved what you were saying as well. Let's keep the dialogue going. I think that's also really important to keep the dialogue going. And with dialogue, we can also change minds. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much to all the speakers. It was really interesting to hearing from all the different perspectives, including the previous panel. So just to close, I want to say that as we heard, walking, cycling, public transport, shared transport play a much bigger role than the one that we are giving it right now in our own policies, plans, and actions, especially for not only achieving the Paris Agreement, but also the sustainable development goals, right? Thinking about the inclusiveness that we heard about, the economic benefits, health benefits that we can have. So a successful wider system, I guess, transformation towards these sustainable modes will require not only prioritizing, as we heard, but also funding and integrating approaches between all these different modes and all the different actors, as we heard. So we hope that we can all take some takeaways, some highlights from this conversation to keep this conversation going and mostly acting in ways that we can deliver better integrated systems, prioritizing active and public transit modes. So thank you again to all the panelists, the speakers, the mayor, Cecilia, Cecile, Pudence, and Hugo, for this amazing conversation, and for the UNF CCC Secretariat to give us the opportunity to be here today. Thank you everyone for participating.